Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to see so many people here. My name is Mike Butterworth. I'm the director of the Center for Sports Communication and Media, part of the Moody College of Communication here at the University of Texas at Austin. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to today's event, the Frank Deford Lecture in Sports Journalism, which is sponsored by the McGarr Symposium on Sports and Society. This is one of the Center's signature events, and we're delighted today to welcome Christine Brennan, who I'll introduce to you in just a moment. First, let me say a few thank yous. First to Cappy McGarr, who has given us his support for the McGarr Symposium and for the Deford Lecture. And also to Moody College of Communication Dean Dr. Jay Bernhardt. Some of you may have heard that Dr. Bernhardt will be leaving the university to take on the helm of Emerson College in Boston. And so this is going to be my public opportunity to be able to say thank you, Jay. Your vision and leadership has made the Center for Sports Communication and Media possible. We will miss you greatly, but we know you're going to do great things in Boston. I also want to say thank you to Dr. McElroy for letting us use the platform of the Fundamentals of Journalism class and all the students in that class for being here, as well as everyone else who has joined us. And a hearty thanks to Chris Hart and Madison Morris, our staff in the Center for Sports Communication and Media, and the tech team led by Keith Berner and all of those who have helped us stage the event today. Now, looking ahead to this afternoon, following our presentation, we will be doing some Q&A, and you'll see that the microphones are at the front of the aisle, so be prepared to come on up and ask questions at the end. In the meantime, if you take a look at the inside cover of your program, you'll see the Center for Sports Communication and Media's social media handles, and we encourage you to tweet and post throughout the presentation this afternoon. Before I introduce our special guest, I do want to spend a few moments with some time talking about the namesake for this lecture, and that's Frank Deford. Frank Deford is among the most celebrated writers in the history of American sports writing. Born in Baltimore in 1938, Deford graduated from Princeton University before he began his career with Sports Illustrated in 1962. He went on to write 15 books, 2 of which were made into movies, Everybody's All-American and Alex, The Life of a Child. The second of those books was a memoir about his daughter who died tragically at the age of 8 from cystic fibrosis. And Deford went on to become a vocal advocate for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, where he served as national chairman for 16 years. Beyond the pages of Sports Illustrated, he was a weekly contributor on NPR's Morning Edition and regularly appeared on HBO's Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel. Deford was recognized with countless awards, including being named 6 times as U.S. Sports Writer of the Year, receiving several honorary degrees, and being elected to the National Association of Sportscasters and Sports Writers Hall of Fame. He and Red Smith are the only 2 writers who were included multiple times in David Halberstam's edited collection, The Best American Sports Writing of the Century. And those 2 stories, The Rabbit Hunter, which is about Indiana University basketball head coach Bobby Knight, and The Boxer and the Blonde, about boxer Billy Conn, are still celebrated today as the standards of sports writing. The Sporting News once called Deford the most influential sports voice among members of the print media, and GQ declared him to be the world's greatest sports writer. Now, this brief summary only begins to describe Frank Deford's accomplishments, but it does help to put in context his influence and legacy. And at the Center for Sports Communication and Media, we're very proud to sponsor this event in his name. Among our tasks is to honor and promote the highest standards of sports journalism and to consider sports journalism's history as well as its present and future. And our guest today more than meets that high standard established by Frank Deford. Christine Brennan is among the most respected and decorated journalists in U.S. sports media. She is currently a columnist for USA Today and a regular contributor to CNN, ABC News, PBS NewsHour, and National Public Radio. And hers is a career of firsts. The first woman writer at the Miami Herald, first woman sports writer at the Miami Herald, the first woman to cover the Washington football team, and the first president of the Association for Women in Sports Media. It should not be lost on us that today, March 1st, is the first day of Women's History Month, and so what a fitting opportunity to hear from Christine. Those firsts, by the way, are more than just trailblazing moments. They also serve as reminders of the barriers women in sports media have been expected to overcome, and as symbols of Brennan's commitment to address substantive issues in sports and to shape a more inclusive industry. Over the course of her career, she has centered the connections between sports and public affairs, and she has not shied away from controversial subjects, whether it's uncovering the details of the Tanya Harding-Nancy Kerrigan rivalry, to calling out Augusta National Golf Club for its refusal to admit women, to Olympic scandals over corrupt judges and athlete doping. And for example, just in the past year, her commentary about Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva has set the standard for sports media coverage about ongoing concerns with performance-enhancing drugs in international sport. Beyond her writing for the Miami Herald, Washington Post, and USA Today, Brennan is the author of 7 books, including her memoir, Best Seat in the House, and Inside Edge, named as one of Sports Illustrated's top 100 sports books of all time, a list that also includes Frank Deford's Everybody's All-American. She has been recognized several times by the Associated Press sports editors as one of the nation's top 10 sports columnists, and has won numerous awards, including the Red Smith Award, bestowed in 2020 for her major contributions to sports journalism. Brennan's distinguished career has made her a sought-after writer, television commentator, and speaker, and like Frank Deford, she truly represents the very best of what quality journalism can mean for readers and the sports community. She's a proud alumna of Northwestern University's prestigious Medill School of Journalism, but today we're proud to call her an honorary Longhorn. Please join me in welcoming today's speaker for the Frank Deford Lecture in Sports Journalism, Christine Brennan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. What a lovely introduction, and thanks for all you've done. The amount of texting that I've done with someone that I didn't even know until a few months ago is extraordinary. Thank you for all the planning and everything you did as well. To Chris Hart, who is here somewhere or was around somewhere. Chris, thank you again for making this all happen. Dean Bernhardt, congratulations. Thank you so much for the kindness, the hospitality. I have felt so welcome from the moment I landed in Austin. Thank you, and good luck to you. I'm sure you're very proud of the communications school and everything you're doing here, and you should be. So thank you very much for everything you've done. Kathleen, my good friend, there you are. We've known each other forever. We won't say how many years. Thanks. To Kevin and his class, all the students that I've met, thank you for the kindness, for lunch, for the good questions, and to the student athletes. I don't know if Sarah Baumgartner's here. Sarah in athletics, thank you for the incredible hospitality over at athletics yesterday, the opportunity to meet some student athletes and to realize why Texas is so great. Now, I have been told that I will get a lot of applause and happy reaction if I do one gesture. And so I'm going to do that gesture, and just don't tell anyone at Northwestern that I'm doing this gesture. I believe it's something like this. Is that right? That's it? And I go like that. And if I'm a famous movie star, I'd go like that, right? That's what he does? Anyway, okay, good. We got that out of the way. Thank you. Thanks for cheering and for proving that point that that is something that would be a positive here. I want to say, first of all, this says it's a lecture. And I know a lot of you students, and I'm so happy to see so many students here in the audience, you probably go, oh my gosh, a lecture. Well, this is going to be a non-lecture lecture. And what I mean by that is I have no notes. I want to talk from the heart about topics, including, of course, the topic of the lecture. And I want to make this session about you and for you. And that means if we veer off to other questions or comments, that's great. I'm going to leave plenty of time for Q&A. Everything is on the table. Everything, there's nothing off the record. It is my delight to be here and to talk to you and have the give and take that is essential in our country, our beautiful nation, in journalism, the First Amendment, everything that we hold dear. I am here to hopefully represent at least some of that, a little slice of that today, and to include you every step of the way. So again, thank you so much for having me. And And Amira, I see you there too. Thank you. And, I'll be calling on you, as you know. Wonderful breakfast, and what a rock star. Thank you so much for all you do. So, as we talk about Title IX, does everyone know what Title IX is? I know it's kind of like this thing, right, that's out there, and it just celebrated its 50th anniversary. And as you know, our topic is the past successes and the future challenges. And I often find myself thinking, okay, we've gone 50 years with this law that has changed the playing fields of America, and in fact changed America in many ways. But of course we have the next 50 years, and what will that look like? And we can only muse and guess. But there are challenges, and when Mike and I were talking about this, the idea of the word challenges was really important. And as Amira and I talked about at breakfast yesterday, or this morning, there have been so many successes, and I do want to highlight them. But as we celebrate this and commemorate this very important law in our country, we also need to understand its shortcomings and where we as a nation need to do better. And so that is my goal here as we kind of start out with Title IX. And again, as I said, we can branch out to other related topics as you see fit. I want to paint a picture for you of a time in this country when girls could not play sports. We're not encouraged to love or play sports. And I'll take you back to the late 60s and a 10-year-old girl who absolutely loves sports in Toledo, Ohio. And as she and the boys would play in the backyard, all the other girls were being told no by their moms or dads usually. No, you can't, girls don't play sports, go home. And this girl kept playing with the boys. But soon the boys went off to Little League, and this girl was throwing a baseball or a tennis ball against the wall and catching it with her mitt or playing catch with herself. I'm sure you've guessed this little girl was me. And I know it might seem strange to think of a time in this country when all of the women in this room were told, no, you can't play sports, but there was a time. And of course, the headline there is, what in the world were we thinking as a nation to deprive the other 50% of our population the ability to learn how to win at a young age, and even more important, learn how to lose at a young age, right? How to handle defeat, learn teamwork, learn sportsmanship, learn all those life lessons that have made all of you, I am guessing, who you are. How many athletes do we have in this room from age 5 to now, any sport, any level? How many athletes? Basically everyone. If I had asked this question 50 years ago and the room was the exact same makeup of men and women, the men would have probably all raised their hands, and I dare say almost no women would have raised their hands. Now, that by itself is not this astronomical, oh my God, this is the sea change, right? But I've got another little audience participation moment for all of us. I want you to start to think, each and every one of you, the students and the non-students as well, but we'll stick with the students. How many organized teams did you play on before freshman year of high school? So that means from first t-ball, that counts as a team, 4-year-old, 5-year-old soccer, that counts as a team. If it was swim team, that counts as a team. If you started doing softball, baseball, lacrosse, that counts as a team. If you did 5 or 6 years of that, that counts as 5 or 6, all right? All the way from whenever you first played on a team sport, whether you had a t-shirt, a jersey, some kind of an actual team. It could have been your dad or your mom coaching. Doesn't have to be a big deal. How many teams did you play on from that first one all the way through the end of summer of 8th grade, right before you hit high school, 9th grade? So start calculating. Do you have an answer? No, not yet. Okay. As you're thinking about it, yeah, you've got 6. Excellent. 11? I feel like we're having an auction here. Do I hear 20? Anyone? Shout them out when you've got it, because I'm going to guess we're going to get 20, we're going to get 25, we're going to get 30.
Say like 12.
12? Okay. Anyone else? Just feel free to shout them out. Yes. 4. Okay. 5. I think a lot of you are forgetting some of your sports. Think of every single 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, all the teams. You didn't have to be big. Yell it out.
15.
15, there you go. Some of the women, I want to hear a few more women's voices, if I may, for just another moment. 5, okay. 22, thank you. 14, 9, excellent. A couple more if you want to yell it out, we'll close it off. Sounds good. So we heard teens, a lot of teens, 20s, and from the women and the men too. Nothing against the guys, but in this case, you'll see my point in a minute here. At that age that I was into sports like probably no girl in Ohio and maybe very few girls in America. I was keeping score of entire seasons of minor league baseball games, Toledo Mud Hens, off the radio. As I say, I dare say almost no girl in America was doing that, and certainly very few boys. I love sports. I was really good at sports. I was a 6-sport athlete in high school, not because I was that great, but because no one cared really about girls' sports. You could play everything. How many organized teams was this girl jock on before freshman year of high school? 0. 0. I hope this little exercise has illustrated at least a part of why Title IX is such a big deal. Because were I your age, a colleague and cohort of yours, I would have been screaming out 15, 20. My niece, I think, did 27. She's very athletic, still is in college. And again, those of you who gave me 6, 7, 8, that's good too. There's no wrong answer on this one. But I know you get the sense of it, how things have changed in basically a generation and a half, 2 generations max, in terms of how we as a nation have decided that Title IX is important, that girls play sports, learning those life lessons I mentioned a few minutes ago, how that is so important. And you are a part of this history. When the history books, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, talk about this time in our nation's history, Title IX, the emergence of Title IX, and the opportunities given to girls and women that were denied them for generations, their moms or grandmothers, but that were given to their brothers, boys forever. That will be a big part of the national conversation. Now, you might be saying, okay, she's making this a little too big of a deal, right? Is this really that important? This one law that, by the way, was not originally scheduled for sports. It was signed by Richard Nixon June 23rd of 1972. The idea originally was for law schools and med schools. If you're getting federal funding, how dare you not have equal opportunity for women and men? Pretty soon, within 5 to 10 years, there's a whole history, if you really want to go into it, people started looking at it from a standpoint of sports, and that's where we are today in terms of the opportunities. So why is this law, why am I up here saying this law is just so important? And I believe that it's not just sports. It's about empowering young women, all of you in some form or other who've played any sports at all, to learn those life lessons to become leaders in this country. I'm an optimist. We are going to have women presidents in this country. Hope I'm right. You guys can check and see, let me know if I am or not. Throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, women running against women, Democrat, Republican, whatever parties we have, women picking women for vice president. I might be a little too optimistic, but why not? Throughout, into the 40s, 50s in this country, 60s, et cetera, well into your adulthood and middle age and old age. We will have more than 50 women in the U.S. Senate. We will have more than 50% women in the House of Representatives. We will have women CEOs as never before. We'll have women running universities and being deans and all the things that women can do, empowered leadership. We'll have women doing that in record numbers for the rest of your lives. And the common denominator for each and every one of those women will be that she played sports at some level because of Title IX. Governors, all of them. It's not talking about having great college athletes, college scholarship athletes. It's not talking necessarily about Olympic gold medalists, although that Title IX has also helped create that. If there's no Title IX, you've never heard of Megan Rapinoe. She exists, you've never heard of her. Never heard of Abby Wambach, never heard of Alex Morgan, never heard of Brianna Scurry. If there's no Title IX, the U.S. women's national basketball team, which has not lost a game since 1992, I don't know if it exists because there's no college sports, to have them get that foundation, that footing to lead them to the great thing. The volleyball team here, congrats to your national champion volleyball Longhorns. Fantastic, fantastic playing. Again, volleyball, swimming. Katie Ledecky would have been one and done because there would have been no chance for her to keep competing. And we know this because in the past, in the 60s, this is exactly what happening with a swimmer like Donna de Verona. Swam at one Olympics, another Olympics. By the time she was college age, there's no college programs, she's done. So these wonderful athletes have graced us with their presence for Olympics after Olympics, and college athletes, of course, for the 4 years they get a chance to play. That's a great part of the Title IX story, but that really, to me, isn't the heart of the Title IX story. What's at the heart of the Title IX story is you. It is your story. It is all the young women, and by the way, the young men who've supported them, cheering for your sisters, cheering for your friends, accepting women's sports in a way your dads or your grandfathers never did. Understanding that girls are going to be athletes right next to you in high school and women in college. And that is the story of Title IX and why I believe there has been such great success over the last 50 years. It's not perfect. A lot of schools there's great reporting by USA Today, my colleagues. I was not a part of this, but of schools not having the numbers wrong and fudging the numbers and statistics, et cetera. There's a long way to go, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But in terms of where we were to where we are now, if you were driving in a neighborhood in the 1970s, 60s or 70s, you were driving in your neighborhood or any neighborhood, and you saw people on a field, and it was all boys, and maybe there was a girl out there, the odds are that she had gone out to that field to tell her brother it was time to come home for dinner. Mom had sent her there. She couldn't play. Now think about it. You're driving in your neighborhood and back home, wherever, and you see a field full of women playing rugby or lacrosse. Maybe it's just intramurals, maybe it's high school, field hockey, soccer, whatever. Do you give that a second thought? Do you do a double take? Of course not. That is incredible change, folks. That just doesn't happen. Now, there are people out there, including the former governor of the state, George W. Bush, who wanted to weaken Title IX. Thankfully, he failed, and then he professed his love for Title IX, so that was good news. But in general, there are people out there who are saying, well, this was going to happen anyway. It was going to be natural progression. You know, eventually, women and girls were going to be able to just play sports. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that it didn't take federal intervention to make this happen. And I'll give you a quick little anecdote. As I mentioned to some of the classes, we grew up as big Michigan fans, and we had season tickets for Michigan football. And Bo Schembechler was the head coach at Michigan. And there was a story, folks, he's been gone for a while, Bo, but back in the 90s, he was the athletic director at Michigan, and he did not believe the women athletes at Michigan deserve the same size letter M as his football players. He said that, and he was actually implementing that at the University of Michigan. And people say we don't need Title IX? This is a leader who is now well into the 90s and thinks that women are inferior to his football players. Now, the good news is I had a chance to talk to Bo on the phone, and I had a chance to ask him about that. And he goes, I know, that was a disaster. I never should have said it. So he gets it. But that was the mindset. That was the mindset at a lot of places. I have to say, as a quick side note, Texas, here, where we are, University of Texas, has cared about women's sports more than most universities in this country. And for that, University of Texas, the Longhorns should be applauded. There you go. Yes, you can do it. Thank you. That the women's sports program here having incredible leadership from Donna Lopiano, now Chris Plonsky, as I mentioned, Sarah Baumgartner, who I've known for a long time from the Big Ten. You've got these great women leading these programs, and Texas has cared and been serious about women's sports and having it be a strong place here. And it's no surprise. Now, the volleyball, the women's basketball team is doing well. Obviously, track and field. You've got the great Patty Sue Plummer, two-time Olympian, is one of the coaches of track and field.
Women's tennis.
Women's tennis. Thank you. Rowing. Thank you. See, these are the things I don't even know. I need to spend more time here, right? But it's no surprise that that has happened, because it's a mindset here, because no one was saying here we're going to give a different size letter M to the women than the men. Now, the Darryl Royals of the world and the Bo Schembechlers did come from a different time, obviously. Those leaders are gone. And they've been replaced by men who have grown, and women, but in most cases still men as athletic directors around the country, who have grown up at a different time, may well have daughters playing sports. They shouldn't have to have daughters playing sports to care, but we know sometimes that's the case. And so we're seeing that over and over again. Now, as I talk about the positives, the challenges for the next 50 years is, of course, part of our conversation. And I think it's very important to talk about those, as Amira and I did today. And if I don't get it right, Amira, I know you will correct me or add your thoughts. And I would love to hear thoughts as well, because again, this is give and take. This is a conversation. I want to learn from you. And it's easy for me to stand up here as a white woman, a suburban woman who's lived what I've lived, and say that Title IX is great and everything is great. We have won the suburbs. There is no doubt about that. We have found the more well-to-do, middle class, upper middle class women, whether they be white, black, other racial diversity, obviously any type of ethnic background. But if the suburban women, we've got them, right? Title IX is achieving great things there. But I want you to think about something. U.S. women's national soccer team, most famous women's team on the planet, right? They're going to be in the World Cup in a few months in New Zealand and Australia. Why is that women's soccer team not 50% black and 50% white? I think there's different roster sizes depending on the World Cup or the Olympics. Basically 4 or 5, 6 women, black women or women of color on that team. How is it possible that in 2023, our U.S. women's national soccer team is not racially balanced? Well, it's possible because we've won the suburbs, but we haven't won the more underserved, wait, what was my word? Under-resourced, thank you. Always got to have a wing woman, thank you. Under-resourced areas, in other words, more you could say the under-resourced urban areas, under-resourced rural areas. We haven't done that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem. That is not success. And that is something we need to do a better job on. And I could even make the strong case that we should have kind of a moonshot approach to Title IX, declare the incredible success of the first 50 years, and look at the next 50 years. And this could be national conversation, it's political, it could be a national legislation, there could be something, because we are missing these wonderful, wonderful girls and women in areas that are economically challenged. A story that comes to mind that I read in the Washington Post not long ago that might break your heart, it broke mine. I was reading about a softball game between a school in urban Washington, D.C., and a school that is basically a suburban school. And the urban team was run limited in the first inning. And you guys know what run limited, right? It was just a disaster. Whatever the score was, out of control, game was over. Those girls in that urban area want to play sports. They love sports. They care about sports. We can assume the adults in their lives also want them to play sports and care about sports. They don't have the resources. They don't have the coaching staff. They're not learning how to play softball the way that women play softball now. We see it. It's amazing, the pitching. Whereas in the suburbs, you've got every dad or every mom taking their 6th grade girl to go to a pitching class or pitching coach to learn how to pitch the way the way you pitch in softball, the incredible fast pitching that Jenny Finch struck out Barry Bonds on. And you've got them learning that. And of course, then who's going to get the scholarships? Who's going to win the games? It's going to be those wonderful, terrific young women who are learning the intricacies of softball. They're learning how to play the game at the level they need to be able to play in college, maybe represent the United States at the Olympics or other, from another country or other nationality. But that's not happening in so many of our cities. It might be an extreme example, but to think, when I read that story and the coaches were talking about, wow, that was a great performance by our team and it's amazing what we did, and I'm thinking, no, complete opposite. That's terrible. Not because I'm glad the team won and when someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, but what are we missing here? And what we're missing is we have Title IX, just praised it, talked about how great it is. it's literally totally missing this incredible chunk of people. And that is a problem, and it will remain a problem until we address that. And that's an issue of economics, it's an issue of racism, it's an issue of, obviously, sexism in many cases, but it's something that we do need to address moving forward. I'm going to call on you for a second because I've talked about audience participation. Other thoughts on that particular topic? Because I do think it's a very important one for all of you for the next 50 years of Title IX. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're doing when we're like, okay, what does it mean that we've covered 50 years with this legislation?
Can everyone hear you? No. Okay, come on up. This is going to be the audience participation part of the thing. Yeah, just for a moment, and then it's just something to think of. We've got an absolute expert here, Amira.
Is this my...
Thank you.
Okay, it works. Hi, sorry, I'm whacking you. So one of the things that we can think of if we're thinking about 50 years on from this legislation is the various ways that it set a foundation for where we are, and also what the cracks in those foundations still are today. And so where the growth of sports has been felt is absolutely one of those places, right? So the fastest growing sports after Title IX are also the least racially diverse. Field hockey, swimming and diving, right? Track and basketball are the only two sports in which Black women are overrepresented. The next close, and they're both up in the 20s and 30% of participation there. The next closest sport is volleyball, and that just hit 11% in the last 3 years. Everything else for Black women's participation in athletics, 2%, 3%. All of those sports are also fastest growing. A lot of this is the equity issue around class as well, as you pointed, the rural areas and the urban areas, because pay for play in youth sports has absolutely grown up in the wake of Title IX. The other cracks in the foundation I would point to is thinking about who's coaching and who's administrating sports. And so at the time Title IX was passed, when we're looking at collegiate sports, women coaches of women's sports comprise about 96% of all coaches. That number is less than 50% today. Women administrators of sports in women's athletic administrator roles in positions, which has been eliminated and turned into a SWA position, made up, again, high 90s. Senior Women's Administrator, right? So we still have a title that is that role, Senior Women's Administrator. And oftentimes people get held in that position. So it's about care and recruitment and the climate and the culture of athletic department. And oftentimes people get to that position and get stuck there because they're not seen as fundraisers or strategic thinkers or somebody who could run a full athletic department, so they get stuck in an SWA position. So that number that used to be high 90s of women administrating sports at the highest level is now under 20% today, right? And so we see a lot of these cracks. And so if we're going to take your charge seriously about thinking and envisioning the next 50 years under Title IX, then I think we owe it to all of us to go back and look at those cracks in the foundation before we build on faulty foundation and end up broke somewhere, falling down and, you know, on something that's cracking in half. So I think that's kind of where we are as we find ourselves last year celebrating this anniversary and also looking forward to thinking how we can continue to build on the legislation.
Wonderful. Are you available for all my speeches?
Hello. Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
If you're in my class, you know me. Wave at me so I know you're here too, also. P.S. After class, come see me. I'm Dr. Davis. I'm a professor of Black Studies and History and American Studies and WGS, some combination of those four here at UT. I teach a sport and society class, a number of other things, and I specialize in the intersection of race, gender, sports, and politics.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kathleen. And what's so important is we had breakfast this morning, and I've covered this issue my whole life. And we had a chance to talk, and I think one of the great things about learning about journalism, frankly, about asking questions, which is what we do. You can go up and ask a stranger literally anything. It's the greatest, journalism's greatest thing in the world. You can just literally, you know, go up to anyone and ask them anything. Now, you could get popped in the nose, but, you know, whatever. But in our conversation talking about this, I knew this was going to be part of my speech, and I thought, I am not an expert in this area. As I mentioned before, clearly you know my background, but you are. And as we talked, so I thank you for that, because it's important. In a way, what I did was kind of just do what you do with a story, which is, or even a column. I've got an opinion, I'm giving that opinion, I'm going to buttress my opinion with an expert. So thank you. Thank you for the time. And thank you for all you do. And I've learned a lot from you, and this is going to be fun. We can barnstorm around the country or something, right? Yeah. You mentioned there's the two things that really concern me for the 50 years moving forward. There's going to be who knows how many other challenges, we just don't know yet. But of course, the issue of not reaching the people, we have not reached. And I think maybe it will be a very high profile and maybe just a kind of a show, but when that women's soccer team is predominantly black, or women of color, then we'll know, that'll be a good little test case. And is that 5 years away, 10 years away, 20, 25, who knows? A question for all of you. And I'm not picking on soccer, I'm just saying as this visible team that gave us Brandy Chastain and Mia Hamm and the Women's World Cup and Brandy whipping her shirt over her head and so many incredible moments, when will they give us that moment? The other piece of the challenge for the next 50 years that comes to mind that you also definitely touched on is how we are losing opportunities for women to coach women. Because as you alluded to, now these women's teams clearly are they're really popular. The pay is great for the coaches. I mean, this is really a great thing. So the success of these women's teams have ended up giving us, or giving more men saying, hey, this is cool, I want this job. Who are the athletic directors? You know, we're probably at what, 85, 80, somewhere in that percent, male athletic directors in the United States, in D1. And those athletic directors, of course, are guys. Nothing against men, nothing at all. Many of them are doing great, great work for their universities and for their athletic departments. But as we know from just a sociology class or just a general knowledge of things, the odds are that someone is going to hire someone who looks like them. This is something that your generation, again, can change. I'm relying on you. I'm throwing a lot on your shoulders. Good luck. Seriously, there's so many things that can happen in this country for the better. But if you've got a male AD and he's got an opening and there's a couple candidates and there's one woman, let's say for a women's soccer position at some university, to coach the women's soccer team, and you've got a man and maybe two women or two men and one, whatever the candidates are, the odds are he's going to hire the man. And you don't have to take my word for it. We can see it. That's the whole point of this conversation. When Title IX started, women's soccer in the United States, the D1 programs, it was 95, close to 100% of those programs were coached by women. And now it's less than 50%. It changes over the years. It's more like even, what, 30%, I think. Yeah, it moves. Obviously, it fluctuates. The Tucker Center up in Minnesota does a great report card. I encourage you to Google this and look it up. It was actually a speech I gave at the NCAA, and we talked about it. I said, why don't we give grades to schools on how they're doing and hiring women to coach women? And there's a lot of D's and F's, you guys. There's some A's. Remember the University of Cincinnati was excellent at this. A lot of B's and C's. But you can find Texas. I don't think it's a pretty picture for Texas in terms of women coaching women. Again, the Tucker Center and I think just coaching report card would probably get you there. And it's just grades. And they have the little emblems of each school, so you can look at those. It's really fascinating, but it's a failure. It's an utter failure. So what we're doing is we're telling all you young women, play sports. Telling people that, like me, play sports. And that there's going to be a place for you potentially in the world of sports. And then all of a sudden, yes, I mean, you could be a sports doctor, you can be a sports agent, you can represent athletes, obviously, you can be sports communications. There's obviously a lot of opportunities and jobs for women as well as men in sports, college, pro, et cetera. But when it comes to actually the one most visible leadership role there is, which is coaching teams, no, we're going to give that job to a man. And again, this is not man bashing. We love you guys. We love men. This is about women coaching women. In basketball, there's men's basketball. Newsflash. Men can coach men's basketball. So why is it that then we're giving all of these plum jobs in women's basketball, not all of them, but some of them, to men? This is a question for athletic directors. We should all be asking it. We should be we should be asking it of university presidents. Trust me, anytime I'm around somebody, I ask them. It's a continual process to ask and to point this out. Another thing for you to look at, and I will paraphrase it, the great Muffet McGraw, the head coach at Notre Dame women's basketball for years, retired a year or so ago. Got to know her, wonderful person, a total advocate for women. Her entire coaching staff at Notre Dame, head coach, and then all the assistants, her entire bench was women. Another person who does that, Maryland, Brenda Fries at the University of Maryland, she does that, and then other coaches do it too. But Muffet McGraw had a little 3-minute tirade at the 2019 Women's World Cup, or Women's NCAA Final Four, excuse me. And with that, she was talking about this exact issue. She'd had it. She just had it. And why is it that we don't have women coaching women? Women need role models. Want to have women running for office. And how is it that in sports, when you have the top job, you've got a man coaching women? That's got to change. And again, it was a wonderful 3.5 minutes for our time, frankly. And she got a lot of attention. She knew something was up. She said, after I talked to her about it afterwards, she said she did it, and then she left the press conference, and she said, oh my God, what did I do? And before she got to practice, she got a text message that Barack Obama had retweeted her tweet that was out there already about her 3.5 minute discourse. And she said, oh boy, here we go. But it was received beautifully because it was totally correct. It was a call to action. It wasn't again saying we hate all men, of course not. It was, if you are going to tell a 6-year-old girl, like you guys all were one day, grow up, you get a chance to play sports your whole life, how do you not have a woman in charge of that program showing those young women that among the many jobs you can have in sports is you can also coach? It's a huge swing and a miss to do that. I would make the case that U.S. women's national soccer team, which has had female coaches and male coaches, right now it has a male coach, again, nothing against him. U.S. women's national soccer team, I've written this before, should always have women coaching. And what a failure of U.S. soccer if we do not have a pipeline of great women, they've all been great players, ready to learn how to coach the under, whatever team, 17, 19, and be ready to be the head coach of the women's national team. And there might be someone out here right now that say, well, I mean, this is tokenism. Oh, we hate tokenism. This is not fair. And again, I would say there is a men's soccer team, and men coach men. Maybe it's time, and we do see occasionally where women will coach men's team. We saw it in D3 in soccer. University of Chicago and New York University had 2 women coaches coaching the final in D3 NCAA soccer, men's soccer. But it's rare. And we know it's not a two-way street, right? So it's something for you to think about. As I said again, this is not necessarily a sermon. It's to throw some things out there. But this is an area where we are failing and where Title IX has failed. And maybe, again, it's time for that moonshot. Or the Rooney Rule, which has not been a great success in the NFL by any means. It's awful that the NFL doesn't have more coaches that look like the players, the vast majority of the players in the NFL. That's another huge issue. But what the Rooney Rule said, you at least have to interview a black candidate. So while that has not been a success, I would say this. Why isn't there a Rooney Rule kind of thing for every single opening for women's sports in D1, D2, and D3? So that at the very least, that athletic director has to look at a woman coming to his or her office and then turn her down if you're going to pick another guy who may not be anywhere near as qualified as the woman you just turned down. To have more women candidates, because if you have more women candidates, at least the thought would be then you may well have more women hired to coach. These are issues that are important. Some of you might say it's not the biggest issue on earth. No, it's probably not the biggest issue on earth. But it is something that is much more than just sports. It's a story of our culture, because sports and culture intersect in 1,000 ways. I've made my career the last 10 to 12 years on that. And be it Colin Kaepernick, or the horrors at Penn State, or domestic violence, or Donald Trump going after, quote, SOBs, or on and on, the soccer and the sexual abuse in soccer, the sexual abuse, the horrors of Larry Nassar and USA Gymnastics. Time and again, sports takes us to important conversations, national and international conversations, that we would not be having otherwise. Think about it. When Colin Kaepernick, just absolutely outrageous that he never got another chance in the NFL. Just outrageous. Meanwhile, guys who are retired are being brought back, but Colin Kaepernick never got another job. And we can talk about that more if you'd like. That is an issue that galvanized the country. You could agree or disagree, but we were talking about it. Obviously, it's sports because he was an NFL quarterback. But the point is that sports brings, there's a common denominator there that others might not be reached, but we're talking about these issues. When the NBA and the WNBA, and we always seem to forget the WNBA on this, when they were in the bubble during the height of the pandemic and COVID, it was the WNBA that was actually fighting, I think, just as hard, if not harder, on the Black Lives Matter issue after the murder of George Floyd, Memorial Weekend of 2020. It was the WNBA players who had sweatshirt or T-shirts made up to go against their own owner, who was a senator, and encouraged and were supporting Raphael Warnock for the Senate. Again, whether you agree or disagree whether Kelly Loeffler should have been a senator or not, when you've got these athletes rising up to try to defeat one of their owners and go for Raphael Warnock, that is a very, very significant cultural moment and social statement. Obviously you can probably tell where I am on a lot of these issues, but even if we disagree, thank goodness sports takes us there. Thank goodness we can have this conversation. As we know as a nation, we should all be having more conversations versus less. Where we are right now with this unbelievable divide and hatred and racism and sexism that's just out there, it's so troubling and so appalling. Can sports be a little bit of that middle ground for us to have the conversation? Now, that didn't happen in the case of Colin Kaepernick. Certainly you can find a lot of people who are furious when they see an NBA or WNBA player wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt or people kneeling. But to me, it's all part of a national conversation and a cultural conversation. Sports was this way once. This is not a first for sports writ large. It goes all the way back, to Jackie Robinson and his heroism in the 40s, late 40s, breaking the color barrier in baseball. It goes back to the 60s, where Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, changes his name to Muhammad Ali, resists the draft, is hated by half the nation, and of course then becomes one of the greatest names and is mourned for a week worldwide after he passed away, lighting the flame, of course, at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, one of the most amazing moments I've ever seen in my years of covering the opening ceremonies. It's Billie Jean King saying, you've got to pay women equally. That also was in the 60s and early 70s. And then she went and beat Bobby Riggs, an exhibition match. Nonetheless, a woman beating a man. For me, just a kid growing up in Toledo, all of a sudden I watched a woman on the same stage as a man and the woman beating the man. I'd never seen that before. And what does that mean? And I've told this to Billie Jean King many times. I'm honored to do a lot of events with her, and also co-wrote a book with her called Pressure is a Privilege, self-help book, just kind of a fun book. And I told her, for me, to see a woman, I never saw a woman on the same, never saw a woman debating a man in politics, ever. This is the place and time. You set moments in their historical perspective and their historical place. And so here I am, and I see Billie Jean King beat Bobby Riggs, and our whole family's cheering for Billie Jean, of course, my dad, everyone. Girl power, and there were bets going on in the gym class, and the gym teachers betting, and the next day, after Billie Jean won in 3 straight sets against Bobby Riggs, you can, again, look it all up, Billie Jean, she wins, and the next day in school, I'm at my locker, and I was kind of this, obviously the girl probably playing the most sports, my boy, male equivalent, was at his locker, and I walked by, and I gave him a smile, and I said, the girls won, and he just slammed his locker and walked away. He had never seen a man lose at anything before. And again, this is not about, yay, the man lost, but it's about empowering women in this case, and about moments in time. You could have another sports writer up here right now saying that Billie Jean, Bobby Riggs, the battle of the sexes, was a joke. I've had men, colleagues, dear friends I work with over the years when we talk about it. We haven't talked about it in years, but if we would talk about it, and they would say, oh, that was an exhibition, that was meaningless. And I always turn to them and say, Maybe to you it was, but not to me. Not to me. Not to a high school freshman who finally saw a woman beat a man at something and just acquit herself well on the same stage as a man. That is what sports gives us. It gives us the opportunity to be inspired. USA hockey, we have the anniversary every year. USA against the Soviets, 1980 Olympic hockey. I was in college cheering my brains out for that team. It's the greatest upset ever. Olympic moments, Michael Phelps, Katie Ledecky, Simone Biles. But also, sports gives us not only Simone Biles winning gold medals left and right, but also being so brutally honest to come forward and say she's got the twisties, she's getting lost in the air, and she doesn't think she can compete. And of course, half the world, or maybe not half, but a lot of the world is like, oh, quitter, right? Tough it up, get out there and do it. And everyone else is going, wait a minute, you know, she might be onto something here. Here's a woman just like Naomi Osaka, just like Michael Phelps, who's talked about mental health issues, who is now saying, you know, I'm in trouble. And she's saying on the world stage, how many people did she help? How many lives did she save? Was there somebody that was contemplating the worst possible thing who said, wait a minute, if Simone Biles can stand up, maybe I'm okay? Maybe I need to listen? Maybe someone will listen to me? Naomi Osaka, the same thing. These aren't always popular opinions, right? I'm sure some of you probably heard Simone Biles was gonna withdraw, and you're like, what? I was gonna watch her. Come on, get out there, do it. Do it for us, do it for the United States. But she probably was more of a winner and had far more of an impact by not competing. She finally did compete in one event. But by saying, no, I've got to step back. And when athletes from the past go, oh, come on, suck it up and get out there, well, they didn't have to deal with the internet. And that's such a huge piece of this conversation. I know I'm a bit far afield. I'm going to open up for questions here in a couple minutes. But the idea of what the internet, what social media does, I don't have to tell you guys, it can be wonderful. It can also be difficult. And you're growing up with it. It's been your whole lives. For those of us who it hasn't been our whole lives, it's, we can push it aside or maybe tolerate it. But when you're in school, when you're a kid, and that's what Simone Biles was talking about. That's what Naomi Osaka is talking about, someone attaching themselves to them. These are issues. These are serious issues that our athletes are speaking up on and talking about, and hopefully giving voice to the voiceless, and hopefully helping that young person out there who needed to hear that from someone. So again, sports as culture, sports taking us to places, conversations that we need to have, whether it be our Title IX next 50 years, and there are many other issues we can discuss if you'd like on that, or other topics of sports and culture. It used to be, I know I said the 60s were very, big time that way. We kind of then went into more of a quieter time, kind of more sports as corporate. Michael Jordan saying Republicans buy sneakers too, which is, by the way, true, and nothing wrong with that, and didn't want to necessarily shake things up. Tiger Woods, same. Tiger Woods has definitely wanted to shy away from these issues. And then the last, and then, of course, how do I forget, one of the greats of all time, Serena Williams, all of them coming to the fore. Serena, when she was still a teenager, talking about the South Carolina flag issue. And when she went down to play in the Family Circle Cup down in South Carolina, going to talk to the governor and saying, change this flag. Whereas Tiger Woods went on vacation and wouldn't talk about it. And that's okay, but that was Tiger's choice. But Serena, and I think Serena and others have heralded this particular time, this last maybe 10 years, of social activism, of speaking out, of athletes finding their voice. And who are we talking about here? Going back to Title IX. Serena Williams, Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles, women. Rock star women making millions and millions and millions of dollars, deservedly so, every penny of it, and finding their voice and using sports to help others and to talk about issues. And when you think of Serena, it's not, of course, her tennis, the greatest of all time, but also, and we talked about this morning, the idea of, I'm a tall person. You could call my mom said once, like, you're a big girl. People are going to think you're, I'm almost 6 feet tall. And there was some connotation, my mom was kind of getting me ready for the real world of, like, you might be seen as big and tall, and you might deal with that. No internet, just, someone might say that. Okay, fine. And I got it, and thanks, Mom, and it was absolutely wonderful, valuable advice. But the connotation was big was bad, right? Women's muscles could be that could be jarring, could be off-putting. We want to see a woman in a beautiful tennis dress, right? We want to see a woman figure skating. Now, forget the fact that they have incredible muscles, Michelle Kwan, Debbie Thomas, Dorothy Hamill, Christy Yamaguchi, on and on it goes. But let's have beautiful lacy dresses. Let's have beautiful, women in swimsuits, right? This is how we wanted to see women. And all of a sudden, the summer of '99, you had women in baggy shorts and baggy, shirts and long socks winning the Women's World Cup and becoming the Sports Story of the Year and Sports Illustrated Sports People of the Year in '99. And 40-some million watching on TV, the '99 Women's World Cup ending July 10th, 1999. And then literally 2 months later, you have the arrival of Serena Williams winning her first US Open. And muscles and strength, and Brandi Chastain with a six-pack when she whipped her shirt off. And then you've got Serena, and she's a big girl, right? And we're like, the nation in '99 is like, well, yeah, I mean, it's great. Williams sisters, Venus, Serena, this is kind of interesting. Tons of racism they had to deal with. I'm not glossing it over by any means, but it was awful for them. Indian Wells and other things. They persevered. They were so great. They kept winning. They competed for the United States, represented the United States at the Olympics, red, white, and blue. All of a sudden, if someone hated them, like, well, okay, but they just won us a gold medal. Hey, maybe I don't hate them so much. On and on it goes, breaking barrier, changing minds, changing our thoughts. And then Serena giving birth and saying, hey, here I am in a Catwoman suit and speaking for all mothers everywhere and giving, again, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, maybe someone struggling with mental health issues, seeing Simone Biles or Naomi Osaka or Michael Phelps. The same thing, Serena, look, and mothers out there tweeting at her saying, thank you. Thank you for talking about how hard it is. Thank you for talking about it. Of course, she's not your normal mom. She's out on the center court at Wimbledon. But there she is, leading the way, doing all these wonderful things, and once again, a woman. Not to say that guys aren't doing it, of course they are. But Title IX has given us that. Title IX has given these women voices. Title IX has given all of you, male and female, voices, because not only all the women here, but all the men, some of you may become dads of 3 or 4 daughters, and you will be the ultimate girl dad. You cheer for your friends, your sisters, the girl next door now. Men are much more receptive, your age group, to women playing sports than any age group in our history. And I can't wait to see what your children are going to be in terms of open-mindedness about girls and women playing sports, just of course like we want to continue to encourage boys and men to play sports. On that note, I feel like I've talked too much. So I would like to, we've got definitely some time for questions, and anything is on the table. You may disagree with me, bring it on, I love that. Who wants to start out? Any topic, anything. If you want to go to the mics, why don't you go ahead, sir? You can go first. And if everyone wants to.
We do have the microphones at the front of each aisle, so please come up to the front and you can line up as you work your way up there.
Yes, please do. And again, the more conversation, the better. Thank you so much. Why don't you say your name and your affiliation to this event? Thanks.
Okay. Hi, my name is Derek, and I'm a student in Professor McElroy. And then I was wondering, what do you think, like Greg Abbott's thought about diversity, equity, and inclusion being, being illegal in the hiring process? How do you think that's going to affect this Title IX?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that. I'm certainly aware as a reader and as a concerned citizen about what's going on there. I disagree. I think if all the things we talked about here, I think show that we have not yet reached any sense of equality, certainly with women with men in sports. And again, that's okay. I mean, it doesn't have, women have got a very late start. If this is a 100-meter dash, men are at the 70-meter mark, and women are coming out of the blocks, right? I mean, the NBA started in the 30s, 40s. The WNBA started in 1996. First men's World Cup was, I think, 1930. First women's was 1991. So of course it's not quite yet equal, but you got to work at it. So I don't know how you work at it if you're literally saying we're not going to do this anymore, because you have to make the effort. And I understand the concept and the conversation, I do, about why does government have to push this, right? That would be, I'm the last person who would interpret or speak for Governor Abbott. But I get the idea. I mean, I do. I think we all understand that, like, let's have it all just happen organically, or again, the best person gets the job. We don't want tokenism. That's why I mentioned that earlier. And these are just false arguments because it's not succeeding. I think are there two of the women's teams at Texas? If someone knows this off the top of your head, feel free to shout it out. Are there only 2 coached by women?
That's correct.
And how many women's teams are there at Texas?
More than 2.
I'm going to take you on the road with me as well.
11. 11 or so, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Okay. So I'll stick to sports. I'll stay in my lane. I'll just dribble, right? Whatever the lines are. Let's just stick with that. 2 out of 8, 9, 10, right? Until that's all, if you got all men coaching men, which I think you do here at Texas, right? Then why don't you have all women coaching women? And again, that's not I'm not saying fire everyone today. No, I know that's not your takeaway. And the guys that I've met, your volleyball coach, they're lovely people. This is not about getting rid of, but when the time comes, it is time to continue to work for progress, right? And it's about inspiring that 5-year-old girl out there somewhere when she watches the Texas volleyball team and sees a woman coaching it and goes, I could be that someday. And that's what sports is all about. So anyway, I haven't really answered your question because I'm not an expert on Texas politics, but I hope I've kind of given you a sense of what I think, and thank you for the question. Thank you. Shall we switch back and forth?
Yeah, that'd be great, because my parking may run out, but
Quick.
But hi, Christine. Fran Harris. I played basketball here when I played at the University of Texas. Our AD was Donna Lopiano, so we had a woman athletic director, Jody Conrad, winning as my coach. There was exactly what you're talking about was actually in place when I got to Texas, and all of a sudden it changed. First of all, I blame you that I'm so mad right now, and I'm so fired up by all the things that you've talked about, because sometimes I tell people, like, what starts at the university changes the world, as we know, but also sometimes what starts here confuses the world as well, because we say that we want to be one thing, and then we aren't that thing. So my question, I've distilled it down to, I'd like to be a part of the solution. So I want to talk about policy changes, like a million athlete march. To me, sounds really exciting. Does that excite anybody else? Women's athletes march. Okay, Christine, you're in. Okay, I saw that you said yeah.
I'll cover it. Yeah, that's better than marching. I'll cover it. Yeah.
How does someone go about changing policy in this area? Let's say if there are women here or men here who want to say, we want to do this at the policy level. What would be 1 or 2 things you would tell them to do to start? Thank you.
And Fran, thank you.
Yeah,
and again, talk about great Longhorns. I want to hear it for Fran. Excellent. Yes. No, when I saw you come, I was like, wait a minute. I haven't seen you in a long time, but great to see you. Thank you for being here, and thanks for all you did, really. Talk about a role model. Like a march. Would young women today, would they, like scholarship athletes from around the country, would they rise for this? We saw it with the WNBA and the NBA for sure with the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. I do think in history, and again, I don't know what you think, Amira, but that was an incredibly special time. One is they were all together because of the pandemic, so they could consolidate. I think we probably have a lot of people, we see it in golf, where, say, women's golfers who are getting a pittance compared to men. They're getting like table scraps. Thank you so much for the table scraps, but they won't fight for equal pay because there was the patriarchy, the misogyny in golf, and we don't know how to get started in golf, which I love the game, but it's just, the demographics are dead and almost dead, and yet they don't want women to come up and be the, they want to put the stop sign up for women, and you just can't make this stuff up. The greatest capitalists among us are more sexist, chose sexism over capitalism in golf. Truly astounding, and that's continuing. So, but for example, in the game of golf, I've written about that, and then they get, like I get daggers because they don't like it. So I'm not trying to pour cold water on what you're suggesting, And I think there's probably a lot in this room even that we could talk about. I do think awareness, maybe I'll call on you again, Amira, but I think awareness is half the battle. And one of the things that I talked to with female athletes, they're so used to having their dad coach them early on, and sometimes the mom. And we'll have more moms coaching now because a 40-year-old mom is different. And a 20-year-old now, when she's a 40-year-old mom, I mean, sports has been her whole life. She got full blast Title IX, right? Especially if she was a suburban, girl. And so they will be, everyone's used to being coached by a man, right? So are we going to get them all out in the streets, so to speak, to your point, to fight something that they're kind of going, well, it's okay, because my dad coached me, and then I had a male coach in high school, and then I had a male coach, You see what I'm saying? So we have to, I think first is the conversation for me and the awareness. And that Muffet McGraw YouTube, 3.5 minutes, watch it. So I'm probably not really, and as a journalist, I also am not usually the organizer. I'm usually the one that's either writing the column that gets everyone going or covering it after the fact. Any thoughts on specifics that can be done? If anyone want to shout it out, and then I'll go to you. Of what's, yeah, go ahead, just shout it out.
I was just going to say, like, I think you were questioning when would, like, female athletes IPT would be on board for that. And I would think yes, because I think we all feel that way. I'm on the women's rowing team here. And I think, like, especially on a team that, like, doesn't drive revenue, isn't like that, like, we definitely feel that. And, like, I know even the sports that do drive revenue and are, more in the light, I guess, feel that as well.
They do, okay.
Like, all of us as, like, a women's athletic department, like, definitely would be on board.
And just to synthesize for those that didn't hear it, the idea is, yes, you think that people would protest. And maybe it starts at a Texas. I mean, maybe you have a day of protest but I also do think that's going to be hard for scholarship athletes. I mean, I totally hear you. But to really go out there, this is why Billie Jean King is remarkable and why Jackie Robinson was remarkable and Muhammad Ali, and I'm missing many, many others over the years, because it is not easy to just throw yourself out there. Any quick thoughts on?
Oh yeah, I mean, I want there to be more room for questions. I would just say that there's a lot of organizations already that do letter writing campaigns and that coordinate between D1 to D3 schools and other kind of conferences that are raising awareness about issues and thinking about Title IX compliance and monitoring, which is another kind of facet of it.
Can they go to your website and find those links?
Not my website, but I will have links.
Okay, so we'll make sure. So what the point is that there are plenty of places you can go, letter writing, emailing, et cetera, to start the process. So I don't know, Fran, if you've got your, I don't want to get your car towed, so we want you to, but there's Mike and others, you'll be able to find this, right? We'll get this out. So, or maybe put it on Twitter, just opportunities. So thank you for bringing that up. And again, thanks for being the legend you are. Really appreciate you. Let's go back over here.
My name is Isa. I'm a student in Milk-Roy's class. My question is more related to women in sports media, because that's kind of the path that I want to follow.
Sure.
And I do have this bad habit of looking at a lot of comments, like comments on social media.
Don't do that.
It is awful. So I wanted to ask if you have like any advice on how to deal with that and how to not let those bad comments get into your head or not being taken seriously as a woman in sports.
Do you get those comments?
I haven't, but I do
Good.
look at other people. Yeah.
Okay, great, good to know. First things first, if you do, when you're covering something, because there is passion, right, and people might read a story, if someone's covering the Texas football team, I have a feeling there's probably some negative tweets, right, out there, just a guess. Well, never, to all of you students, my number one piece of advice, and anyone, but especially, students, don't go in and look at any mentions. Never do it. Have your roommate, your brother, your sister, your uncle, your best friend go in and either mute or block them or do something, like you can hide replies to, right, whatever. And I know people say, well, if you block them, then they can like glory in that you block them. Well, yeah, but if you blocked them, they're gone. So that's a positive. Often it can be, if you do a click, and I'm saying don't look, but if you do look, you'll see that they might have 5 followers, or 7 followers, or they're a Russian bot, right? And so I am always amazed when some of my colleagues who I love dearly start fighting with these people. I will never, you will see, never at C. Brennan Sports ever will I engage with anyone. So my strong suggestion, never engage, because that gives them oxygen. And also for the person that's got, you know, even 100 followers, they would reach more people if they stood up and yelled in a high school assembly, right? Point being, that is not, your beautiful life is not worth 1 second of the great lives you are leading to be dragged into the mud by these people. Twitter is great. It's a fabulous way to break news. At the Olympics, I love Twitter, right? New York Times or somebody else can go, oh, we broke it first. Nope, there's the timestamp. You can see who broke the story. I'm teasing, of course. But you know what I mean? It's just fun as opposed to a newspaper hitting a doorstep who broke it first, right? So I love Twitter for that reason. I despise Twitter for the cesspool that it is, and especially dragging down young people who this should not be even in your thoughts. I want you to go full steam ahead on your journalism career and everything else that you can do, right? So with that in mind, I would ignore it. For me, obviously, like when I write about Tiger Woods idiotically giving, you know, Justin Thomas a tampon as a sign that, you know, he outdrove him, like, you know, you hit like a girl. Tiger Woods, almost 50-year-old, 47-year-old girl dad, whose daughter is a 15-year-old soccer player, is now doing the tricks and hijinks and pranks of a 7th grader, Tiger Woods. Of course, all the Neanderthals and the, you know, came out and just wanted to bury me. I barely read them. A couple college friends went in and dove in, and I said, do not do that, because they're going to attach themselves now to you too. So it's really troublesome. Use it for its good, and make sure you do not spend any time reading the comments. I mean, if they're positive, great, but if you start seeing negative, get them out of there, because otherwise it's just going to ruin your day, and I don't want to ruin your day. I want you to have a great day.
One little thing, the class ends in a minute, but we're going to still be here for 15 more minutes.
Oh, good.
So people can still be here, but if people are walking out, it's nothing that you've said.
Well, you know what? I mean, I've had people walk out before, and I knew that. Thank you, Kathleen. No, totally great, and obviously I love to talk about issues and go back and forth. So if anyone has to leave, please go, and thank you for being here, and otherwise we will go back over here.
Hi, my name is Misha, and I'm also here with the J301 class. First of all, I just want to say thank you for your service to the world of journalism, sports journalism, and just being an inspiration to so many people.
My pleasure.
My question would be, obviously, the big controversy in sports around gender is pay. You know, the main example everyone always brings up is that women in national soccer, the women's American team, is wildly more successful than the men's American team, but the pay gap is so extreme. So my question would be, what were your thoughts on that issue, and how much of pay for athletes is attributed to audience size? Thank you.
Well, no, thank you. I appreciate the question. As you know, the women's team is now paid equally because the men, the young Title IX males, actually decided to give up some pay so that the women would have equal pay. How great are those guys? The guys that we're talking about, the guys that grew up with the women athlete next door who now respect them. And that would not have happened with their dads or their grandfathers. So huge positive, and I'm glad you mentioned this to allow me to say that. They're paid equally. Crowd size and audience size, women have more than men, the US women. The #1 most watched soccer match in the history of the United States is a women's in 2015, Japan against Japan. Whatever happened over Thanksgiving, which were, you know, some good numbers. I mean, none of them came close to college football or pro football, but they weren't as close as the women are still #1. And they'll probably do it again with New Zealand, depending on the time, and Australia in this summer in the Women's World Cup. So this nation watches women's soccer more than men's soccer. One of the issues, there's so many issues here. I can look at it as capitalism versus the national governing bodies. The WNBA players make far less than the women. Make far less than the men, obviously, the NBA players. We talked about the difference in how many years they've been around. Obviously, the difference in sponsorship. So many things there. I wish, and I think we all wish it was different. We wish they had better airfare. We wish that they didn't have to go overseas like Brittany Griner did. You know the story, how awful that was. That was all triggered because she had to go overseas to get paid, as do many of her colleagues. But that is, at the end of the day, capitalism. If we're all sitting and complaining about it, why aren't we buying tickets to WNBA games, right? We are, maybe we aren't, whatever. So that is capitalism. When you get to the national, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it is, you know, I mean, why does Serena make more than John Isner? Well, because it's Serena. So we do have a capitalism thing that can also benefit women sometime. The national governing bodies, which U.S. Soccer is a national governing body, USA Gymnastics, U.S. Figure Skating, they're all NGBs, as the word is. Every Olympic sport has an NGB, national governing body. Those are nonprofits for the good of the game. You make a strong case that you should actually be paying the underrepresented gender more to encourage them to play more. For example, in the sport of figure skating, this is in the weeds, but I think it hopefully can help understand this argument, because it is a fascinating argument you brought up. In figure skating, obviously the women are the stars. Michelle Kwan, you probably still remember her. She's been retired for years. She's an ambassador now to Belize, so she's long since gone from skating. But she put more people in the seats and more eyeballs watching on television than, say, Michael Weiss, a wonderful young man. I knew him forever, covered him forever, two-time Olympian, three-time national champ. But Michael Weiss received the exact same money in bonuses from the national governing body as Michelle Kwan. And when I asked the national governing body why, they said because we want to encourage boys to figure skate, because we're not getting the boys for various reasons, which we don't even go into here. So we want to encourage moms and dads to have their boys figure skate. Let's make the money equal. Golf, they don't care about that. Soccer, until just a few months ago, they didn't care about that. Absolutely misogyny on display for all to see in national governing bodies that are by definition, legally, nonprofits for the good of the game. That's what's going on. Soccer finally got their act together. The golf is by far the worst in terms of unequal pay with men and women. But everything else, Katie Ledecky makes the exact same as Michael Phelps or whoever, you know, Caleb Dressel. You know, it's apples to apples everywhere, except soccer, but now soccer's figured it out. And the reason, to be fair for soccer, one last thought, the Men's World Cup generates so much more money than the Women's World Cup because, of course, of all the misogyny around the world, where like all these great nations that play men's soccer have never cared about women's soccer, or they finally do. Or England, which you know, of course, invented soccer, then told its women for what, 50 years they couldn't play the game. What in the world were they thinking? So that's part of the problem. So that's why it was so remarkable that these wonderful Title IX males in their 20s gave up some of their World Cup money so that the U.S. women would have equal pay with the U.S. men. That is absolute landmark moment, for sure. So I hope I explained it. It's a very convoluted thing. I hope I did a decent job. Thanks for the question. Excellent. Oh, good. Well, that's good. Yes.
Hi, my name is Lauren, and I'm also in the J301 class. So just going off what you're talking about with Billie Jean King and her match, do you think that there's ever going to be a time where men and women are consistently competing against each other, whether it's on a high school level or professionally?
You know, some sports certainly do. I mean, equestrian, horse racing, you know, jockeys, male, female, jockeys, women jockeys have won Triple Crown races. Certainly, I think in any sport where there's where size, strength, you know, defense is being played, I don't think we'll see it. I mean, what this often does is plays into the shock jock radio guys who are like, why do we have a women's soccer team? Why don't we just make Megan Rapinoe try to make the men's team, right? Well, that's just so hateful and so awful. And because Megan Rapinoe, you know, I love her, she's great. I mean, she would not make the men's team. I think we pretty much all, that's not a news flash, right? Would she make a college men's team? And I'm not let's take Megan out of the equation. You know, anyone, and the best woman soccer player on earth, would she make a college men's team? Do we want to see that? No. We as a nation have decided that we want our girls and women to play sports. So we have now put together categories, obviously. Perfect example, girls can wrestle in high school, and if they don't have a girls team, they're allowed to wrestle against the boys. So maybe 10, 20 years ago, I forget where it was, 2 boys said they wanted to play on the girls' field hockey team at their school, or several boys did. And the school board at that school said no, because within a few years, it would be the boys' field hockey team. And they said, no, we want our daughters, our girls, all the kind of stuff we talked about, I talked about early on here, to learn those life lessons, so we're not going to allow that. So I think it's an interesting conversation. I mean, certainly the mixed doubles, I mean, pickleball, right? I mean, there's a lot of places it can happen. And there's a lot of women athletes who are better than male athletes. But when you get to the point where it's Serena Williams and Roger Federer, I mean, I think we know what I don't think I have to say another word, do I? What that's going to look like. Well, I don't want to see that. Does anyone want to see that? So Bobby Riggs was 55 years old. And Billie Jean was #1 or #2 in the world, Margaret Court, whatever. And she was 30-ish, 33, whatever she was. So that's what that was. And that's why everyone thought it was an exhibition and didn't matter. Books have been written on this topic. It also gets us into the trans conversation, which we can go into if you'd like. But there's so much to discuss on all of these issues, as we care so much deeply about equality, fairness, opportunity, et cetera. These are going to be issues that are going to be discussed the rest of your life. And that's okay, because we need to figure them out. So I hope I've answered it kind of. But I do think it's great, as I said, in these sports, in golf, you do see men and women play golf, and you can have, I mean, most women would outdrive any man. An LPGA player would outdrive any man on earth. But guys that think, oh, I can outdrive, Nelly Korda. No, you cannot. Even a good weekend player could never. A man couldn't do that. But Tiger Woods, yes. So that's why you have a difference in terms of the tee boxes. So on and on it goes. But there are certainly sports, and it will continue to be. And I think that's great. And recreationally, it's fantastic. Thanks for the question. Yes?
We're going to have time for one last formal question. I know people are patiently waiting. We invite you to come on up for some informal conversation.
I'll answer every question.
Formal question.
You're on that side or this side?
Well, I think I'm coming over to this side.
Okay, no lead in, okay? So just ask her the question.
Okay. Yes. Hi, my name is Nate. So one of the questions I wanted to ask was this. So one thing that you said was that, what was I going to say? That most of the women who play for D1 sports teams often come from white, affluent backgrounds, correct? When do you believe
Well, I didn't quite say it that way, but the Title IX has been very successful with that group.
Yes.
Yes.
So what I'm wondering is, when do you believe it will become successful for women of color and women of lower income backgrounds?
Well, that's kind of what we were talking about. And the next 50 years, which is a perfect question, because that gets us to the conclusion. The next 50 years, your age group, you guys need to work on that. I mean, I'm still here, I'm working on it, but you know what I mean? I think we've got to do it, we've got to reach kids who are not being reached. And I would say that for boys too. But it tends to, I mean, we've got a lot of people working on boys, so I'll kind of focus on the girls in terms of girls that are left behind. And sports, my goodness, we know this, right? If a girl is playing sports, she is going to be much less likely to get into trouble, much less likely to have an unwanted pregnancy, much more likely to care about academics and care about going to college, whether it's a college scholarship or going to college. I mean, sports makes so many people better. And so, but we've got, as we've said, we've got to have a moonshot, we've got to do something because we're not reaching them. We just simply are not. We've got the girls with blonde ponytails, love them. This is not ripping girls with blonde. We've reached them. But where are those girls that don't look like them? And you know who's talking about this a lot is Brianna Scurry, the great goalkeeper of the '99 team. I did a whole column with her, I think you guys can find easily online, talking about this exact issue. Where are the women of color on our U.S. women's national soccer team? And Brianna's taking that on. And of course, she's a woman of color herself, one of the stars, huge stars of that '99 team. Without her save, there's no Brandi Chastain. So anyway, so thanks on that. And before I go, you guys, thank you very much. Before I go, I just want to say a huge thank you for this opportunity to be here. I have loved my time at Texas. There we go. And I want to say Frank Deford was a role model to me. I knew Frank fairly well. And we did an event together at Yale University after the Athens Olympics in '04. A wonderful man, kind and generous and thoughtful and caring. The most beautiful writer. You were talking about the Bobby Knight piece. Just read it. It's you know, who remembers a story from what, 35 years ago? We all do. And to honor his memory and to do the things you are doing here is just a delight. I am honored, so honored to be here in his name. Again, a dear friend, a role model, a colleague, and a great help to me in my career. And I thank you for this opportunity, and I'm here for you to talk more. Let's just keep talking. Thanks again. Have a great night.